Hey guys, welcome back to Clueless Gamers. This is First and 10, the NFL football podcast over here. I'm your host, Pete, joined in a second by my co-host, Brian. Brian, we're back here, man. We're staying consistent early here in the season. Last week, if you caught and you watched it, I greatly appreciate it. We greatly appreciate it. It was our whole big extravaganza for our predictions. It's where everything goes on record. It's on video for divisions and playoffs and surprise teams, all that stuff that we thought. We cemented it there, and it's there for the rest of the season. Some of those predictions, at least mine, I will say, not looking great here through week one. But nevertheless, we have to stick to them. Those are ours. We're back here, season 4, the first official week where football has concluded, Brian. We're through a week of football and a Thursday night game here in week 2, which we will also get to as we're recording here on Saturday night. But Brian, with that, I welcome you in, man. How are you as a Jets fan? I'm sure we'll get to this, but I'm sure you're pretty somber after what you saw Monday night.
Well, yeah, I mean, look, it was just utter disbelief at the fact that all the hoopla and all the energy all off season and the hype for a grand total of 4 plays
Four
and the
plays.
season. See, the thing was, it's not like this could have been an injury where it was like he's out 4 to 6 weeks, which would be bad enough.
Right.
I really would be bad enough, like right out of the gate. But no, it has to be the absolute
The
crusher to
worst
be the
thing you
entire
can get.
season.
Yeah.
It's just really gonna. I mean, as good. This team has a ton of talent. And I mean, we'll get into it as the show goes on, but I just think the quarterback downgrade is going to be too much to overcome.
Yeah, it's gonna be tough. I mean, listen, I'm not a Jets fan. They're someone that I didn't root against them. I actually root for them for you and for Dylan and for all our other Jets friends and just for the fan base in general that you guys have suffered for so long. I mean, you very much feel like I always make the comparison to the Mets in baseball of like it's just like a snake bitten franchise that cannot get over the hump. And with the hard knocks and the hype and just Rodgers looks so at peace and this team is so loaded and all we talked about all offseason was them. But more importantly, we talked about all this team is one quarterback away. And, to have that happen, yeah, crazy stuff. I mean, hey, we're talking about it. So, Brian, let's just jump into it. Let's go full force into this Monday night game here. I think that's a good way to kick this off. Let's get the emotions out early on here for you. Jets Bills. The Bills come in here. Last year, they played. It felt like a very similar game last year here because Josh Allen was tormented against the Jets defense, especially in MetLife last year. It was really Zach Wilson's like only sort of decent performance, but it was more the defense there, and it was very much unexpectedly because Jet fans thought it would be different. The whole NFL world thought it would be different this season with Rodgers, and you ended up 4 plays in being back right in the same spot. But before we go more into the Rodgers stuff, I just wanted to talk about the game overall. And Rodgers goes down, all that stuff happens, right? For me, you're the Buffalo Bills. You're a fan. You're a player. You're a coach. There is no way you do not win that game on opening night. Most people had you as the favorite, the more talented team. You're talking about a team whose heart just got ripped out of their chest. And it's not like Zach Wilson came in and threw for, Mike White against the Bengals a couple of years ago, was throwing for 400 yards, just completely unexpected, took the Bills by surprise. I mean, Josh Allen was bad, particularly in the second half. He has
Yeah.
3 turnovers. He has a very Mark Sanchez-like play where he runs into his own lineman and kind of fumbles the ball there along with a Jets defensive lineman. It was a really bad night for the Bills quarterback. And, I think it's worth mentioning, of course, that this has been talked about on talk shows, on sports radio all week. So we're not creating anything new here, but giving our perspectives. I think it's very clear that this man has regressed, and meaning in Allen. He's just not the same quarterback since Daboll left. He's honestly not been the same quarterback since the 2020 season, where that was his best season, and then 2021 he has that great playoff run where he kind of played okay in the regular season, has a ridiculous playoff run. Honestly, that team probably should have gone to the Super Bowl, maybe even possibly won it, because for everything that was the greatness of Patrick Mahomes, they had 13 seconds left. They should have won that game. and I very well think that they would have been the favorite to go to the Super Bowl, beat the Bengals, and then move on, and maybe even possibly beat the Rams, which we saw, you know, another 7 months later they play opening night, and it was a complete mismatch. Even though take that with a grain of salt. So for me, he is massively regressed. His completion percentage is significantly down. He's making just very college-like Josh Allen errors. I mean, some of those, Whitehead. One of the best stories of Monday night is Whitehead has a contract incentive, 3 picks or more on the season. He got $250,000 extra dollars. He got that on game one. So he ends up having a great night, and it was just all around. It was just, I focus more on a particularly bad performance from the Buffalo Bills and Josh Allen. I'm sure you will have some words on that before focusing on your fantastic Jets defense. But Bry, how did you see it that night?
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to give the Jets a little more credit
Of course.
than looking at it from the Bills' perspective. Yes, the turnovers were clearly an issue for Josh Allen and have been for a while. I mean, I still think he's going to end up putting up really good numbers this year. I think he's going to bounce back in a big way in week two. I'd be very surprised if he didn't light up the Raiders at home. But if he doesn't, then I'll be a little more in your camp where it's like, yeah, he has regressed, and how good can this Bills team be? They have their sights on, being a number one seed in the AFC, and it doesn't look like they're that kind of team, especially the way they played in week one. But I look at it more from the Jets' perspective that their defense was really
Fantastic.
getting after it, making plays. I mean, the secondary played lights out. It really looks like this defense has a chance to be special. And admittedly, I
I agree.
thought, some of the comparisons when they're talking about the 85 Bears, it's like, well, slow down.
Right.
The week one performance was awfully impressive and allowed the offense to, not have to do anything special, but just do good enough, which is what Zach Wilson did. He made the plays that he had to. He was not great by any stretch, but he made the big play to Lazard, the crazy catch by Garrett
Amazing
Wilson, which
catch.
was not a great throw
He
from
even said
Wilson,
so
but
himself. Yeah.
exactly. But and then obviously you get the play in overtime, which is just the exclamation point, the punt return. And I just can't imagine what it was like to be in that building, just like the turn of emotions throughout the game from what we saw
Yeah.
starting out in the first quarter to the very end. Like it just I can't even imagine it. It just was that crazy.
Yeah, it was incredible. Actually, I talked to Dylan about this when I saw him this past week. Dylan, friend of the show, he's been on here before, and he was at that game with his dad, and he said it was like an undescribable roller coaster. Like to
Sure.
have this moment where he said like he's never been in a stadium in any sporting event of any team that was so electric, the energy when Rodgers was coming out with the flag and the opening like buzz right before they really came onto the field. He said there was nothing like it, and he also said there was also nothing like when he was down on the field and the silence that was in that
Yeah.
stadium was
Yeah.
just it's undescribable unless you were really there. And to have that cap off of the ebbs and flows to see him go in the cart, know it's very bad. Everybody's looking down at their phone, he said, including him on Twitter, just scrolling and scrolling, looking for the latest
Yeah.
updates. People saying it was the Achilles, which it ultimately ended up unfortunately being. And then to have the game stay close, the Wilson touchdown, the overtime punt return. I mean, just a wave of emotions. He had no voice afterwards. So, maybe we'll get him on the show at some point to talk about it himself in person. But it must have been a wild night, and I think after it settles in, kind of especially the next day when the MRI comes through, like I think it was the realization of like, okay, like this is the situation we're in. We're back to square one, and for me, I've seen a lot of talk this week of who do they pick up? Of course, they're going to pick up some veteran QB to play backup. You need that for depth. Also Wilson has historically in his young career has gotten injured, so like you need depth at that position. But to me, and I think to a few people out there, Wilson's your best option. I don't think there's anyone you could realistically bring in here right now that could pick up this offense on the fly and perform as well as he can. He doesn't have to be a superstar. He doesn't have to perform like you expected he would when he was the number 2 overall pick. He has to be a glorified game manager. I mean, that's literally all he has to do. Throw for like with this defense and this running game, if this offensive line can get the push that they were getting on Monday night, if they can get that consistently, he throws for 190 yards, 200 yards a game, and one or two touchdowns, no turnovers. They're good. They're good. Like it's completely fine. And it just did he learn enough in those 3 months with Rodgers to kind of take that turnover bug out of him? That's my question. And he comes and he throws that bad pick almost as soon as he gets in there. And to his credit, he kind of rode, he righted the ship after that. They had a lot of passes really around the line of scrimmage. That's exactly what you need right now, and that's you're gonna have to rock with Wilson. I mean, do you agree with that, or do you see there's another option out here to go with?
No, I really don't. I mean, we saw the story that came out about how the Jets were interested in a potential trade for your guy, Matthew
Stafford.
Stafford,
Yeah.
before they ended up getting Rodgers, but that doesn't seem like any kind of a consideration, especially after the way Stafford played in week one, which I'll be curious to get your thoughts if it changed the narrative for you at all about your Rams prospects going forward, but at least for week one, it was a good performance. But with him off the table, you're talking about, a Carson Wentz or someone of that nature. It doesn't move the needle. He's fine to bring in as a backup, but you're not going to feel good about handing the reins to Carson Wentz to run your offense. I don't think so.
Yeah, having two number two overall or picks on your roster, I don't see how that works. I mean, there's a reason. My biggest thing was him is one, just like Wilson, he has a serious turnover problem. But two, he's a guy that's been in several locker rooms now that I think where there's smoke, there's fire. And when players are talking about you in the way they've talked about Wentz, it doesn't seem like you're the greatest teammate and the greatest leader, right? So I don't really think he's a fit for here. I've seen other names be tossed around: Winston, Cooper Rush. There was the fantastical suggestion that no one actually believed of, do we give Tom Brady a call? Come on, I mean, he was at the ceremony on Sunday to be inducted very early. Robert Kraft made the exception into the Ring of Honor there and to be honored. He's not coming out of retirement and giving up his Raiders shares because he's a minority owner in the Las Vegas Raiders. He's not doing all of that to come back to play for the Jets in this offensive line. It's just not happening. So
And Matt Ryan neither. You're not bringing him out of the
no, Matt,
broadcast booth.
no,
He's washed
no,
too.
no. Matt Ryan's done. I saw some people making the jokes, based on what RG3 said also on, I think it was NFL Live, where he kind of like hinted like that, oh, he could still play, and is he trying to pitch for the Jets? None of these guys are going to work. Like, there's just, to me, if you want to give an old quarterback a call, the only one in my mind is Philip Rivers. Because, he played decently well. He had a good year, took an 11-5 Colts team to the playoffs, and they played a very close game in the wild card against the Bills. We saw Roethlisberger at the end of his career. He not only was at peace, his arm was shot. Like, he's not going to be someone you can bring back. And a lot of these other guys around the league, there was a possibility that, do you bring in Brett Rippon, who's with the Rams? We just called him up from the practice squad because he has familiarity with the offense and Nathaniel Hackett. But now with all the stuff that we'll get to with Bennett, he's going to be the Rams' solidified backup. So that's not happening as well. It seems like you guys have a theme of going after Rams backup QBs here. But none of that's going to work out, and you're going to end up having to ride with Wilson. But for the game itself, I just think it was the football gods have a way to cause pain. They certainly have done that to Jets for the entire history of the franchise. But for one night, at least, they ended it on the right note. Like, it felt cosmically right. I know that sounds ridiculous, but to me, like, it felt right that you guys won the game in the way you did after all the emotion you went through, and I'm sure you felt the same.
Absolutely, and I think too with the football gods that it was like, no, you're not done with Zach Wilson. Like you spend a high draft pick on him, he's getting another
Yeah.
chance here, and he sure is.
Yeah, he's getting a shot. I mean, Salah's face kind of, was all over Twitter and the broadcast. I think that, he had that blank stare when Rodgers was on the field and Wilson was warming up, and it was just like, how could you be back at this place? Like, it just makes no
Yeah.
sense. And watching the Jets' reactions online has been, a little bit obviously comedic because it's like just painfully comedic to see that you guys can never have anything. But also it was a little bit sad, seeing Rich Eisen and Greeny on ESPN and all these guys that are huge Jet fans And it's unbelievable that a quarterback Achilles injury is not a common thing, and to have that 4 plays in, I mean, it's wild. But listen, he went through surgery. It's successful. It's well. He says he's going to have some kind of great routine to come back. He seemed to hint on Instagram and on the Pat McAfee show there that he's fully able and wants to, if everything goes right, to come back for another season. I certainly, as a football fan, hope he does because you don't want to see a guy go out like that. Like a Hall of Fame quarterback, you want to see something better. And I was very fascinated to see how this Jet season would go. It didn't, but hey, great win. I come more out of it for the long term future. I come out of it more concerned about this Buffalo Bills team. Um, that's things are badly brewing there, man. Like I just I kind of picked them out of necessity during our playoff predictions because there's a lot of teams that are up and down there in the AFC, and I have questions, but yeah, how you feeling just even after week one for your Super Bowl pick? Because between Diggs and Allen and McDermott and don't look great.
Well, I did have them as the number one seed. I didn't have them making the Super Bowl, though. My
Okay.
pick was 49ers to win it, and I'll tell you, I was feeling very good about that after their week one
Yeah.
demolition of the Steelers.
Yeah.
And then I had Cincinnati coming out of the
That's
AFC.
right. That's right. It's
So,
my fault. But
um,
I had them going to at least I think the AFC Championship, and you know we'll we'll talk a lot more about them if this whole thing against Vegas this week doesn't go well. But yeah, Brian, I'm sorry, man. Sorry that went the way it did. Props to you for the rest of the season. Hopefully it goes somewhat well, and all you could hope is that the rehab with Rodgers, you know, takes the best possible, kind of goals, all the rungs on the ladder that it needs to, and he can
yeah.
get back as quickly as possible. But yeah, what a gut punch, man. That was tough.
I, I mean, admittedly, it always felt surreal that Aaron Rodgers was wearing a Jet uniform, and here we never got a chance.
I
We saw it for 4 plays.
I thought it was more surreal that Vinny Testaverde
Yeah,
was there as one of the honorees, was there at the game, and in that moment, you go back all those years ago in the 1999 season. You guys are coming off an AFC Championship appearance. You guys had all that hype, and what did he do in Week 1? Popped his Achilles. Like it just feels like the football gods were cruel. They were ironic, and yeah, that was something. Actually, even another point Dylan said there was a performance at halftime, and the song where they're saying, dream on, that was playing, and that he felt like he was being made fun of. And like as a Jets fan, there, it's like, yeah, he's dreaming on about what this season could have been, and it was taken away
yeah.
from him.
Mm,
It's just cruel. It's cruel. This game is cruel, man. That's how it goes.
mm,
But we'll see,
yes.
we'll check in with the Jets for next week and see how that goes. Tough performance this week coming up against Dallas in Dallas,
Yeah,
and where
sure.
Rodgers historically plays amazingly in AT&T
Yeah.
Stadium, and we'll not be able to see that. But Brian, let's go to some other games here. I wanted to kind of get your thoughts as you mentioned 49ers in Pittsburgh. Let's go there. I think it's a game that needs to be highlighted. And, the San Francisco 49ers, yeah, not looking great right now where I put them as second place in the division. I had them get into the NFC Championship, but I did have them in second place. And to have the demolition they have, where I was buying the Steelers hype man to start this season. I
This
bought it.
was your lock of the week.
I was my lock of the week, which was a new segment that was your idea that we're introducing. This was my lock of the week. I thought they would completely at least cover the spread. The Steelers would and get blown off their home field to open the season. This Niners defense looks as good as ever. Offense was efficient. And the Steelers, I mean, that offense and Kenny Pickett looked lost, looked nothing like they did in the preseason. Bry, you mentioned this game earlier. What's your overall takeaway of what was one of the more dominating performances in Week 1 that I can remember?
That the 49ers have a chance to be a dominant football team.
They sure do.
I really believe that. I mean, it comes down to quarterback health, and like we said, Brock Purdy got the nod. Clearly looked good enough to go. And boy, I mean, do they have talent for days on that offense? Like you don't get a huge game out of Debo Samuel. Well, Brandon Ayuk steps in over 100 yards, 2 scores. Christian McCaffrey played like the superstar that he is, unstoppable, had a huge long touchdown run. Purdy played great football. The defense just harassed Kenny Pickett and company. I mean, the Steelers had no running game to speak of whatsoever. Najee Harris looks like now you might be able to call him a bust. I mean, he just doesn't look like he's that good.
He only
And
got 6 carries though. Just the nature of the game.
so I'd be a little worried about the Steelers. Deontay Johnson now the number one receiver's out for a couple weeks. I just it looks like it's going to be a little tougher than we thought for the Steelers and for the 49ers. I mean, the thing with football is that you need to see teams be consistent. And like the Niners had a great effort week one. I mean, of course, you in your bias would like to see them have a stinker tomorrow, but from a football standpoint, when you want to see consistency out of the good teams to put it together week after week, I think this 49er team has the capability of doing that.
No, for sure. I mean, there's a bias because I'm a fan, but I'm also realistic. I mean, this team is fantastic. I mean, there's a reason why I picked them going to the NFC Championship again. I mean, they're super talented. I don't think Brock Purdy's some all world level quarterback, but you don't need to be. When you have this many guys, this many potential Hall of Famers, definitely all pros right now on both sides of the ball, it's pretty easy to operate, and he's slinging it well. Credit to him. He's efficient. He's got a little bit of athleticism. I don't think people suspected he would when he was the last pick in the draft. And they come at you in waves on the defensive front. They pound it down your throat there on offense in the run game, and they're scary, man. There's a reason why that this team, every single opponent of theirs last year that played them, lost the week after they played them because you were that physically beat up. That's never happened in NFL history. They were the first team to actually make that one of these kind of unique records. They're a fantastic team, and I thought they would take a step back this year a little bit just because I really had my doubts about Purdy, early on in the season. What would the elbow look like? It looks fine. He looked pretty good there. T.J. Watt did his thing, got 3 sacks, but other than that, I mean, the Steelers' defense was pretty much handled. Who have a lot of solid players and all pros on their side of the ball. They were made to look like it was a college team against an NFL team in Week 1, and I thought it was one of the more impressive performances I could remember in a Week 1. Week 1's a weird. A lot of weird stuff happens. We definitely seen that this weekend, but this was not one of them. I mean, this team is going to be consistently dominant all year long. That being said, I'm not completely selling my stock on the Steelers. Like I think there is some stuff there that they can work out. I mean, of course, this is a gigantic game here on Monday Night Football coming up, but I think there is some hope there, and they got to bury this game tape 12 feet in the ground, never pay attention to it again, and hopefully they can kind of right the ship for next week.
Yeah, and as for the 49ers, they get your football team tomorrow, so we'll see if they're able to make it back to back dominating
For
performances on
sure.
the road, and then they've got the short week with the Giants coming in Thursday night. So some interesting games ahead.
Tough go. Brian, do you have a game that you would like to highlight next? I'm so interested to hear that.
Well, I think it's only fair we threw you under the bus with your lock of the week that didn't pan out. Well, my
That's
lock of
fair.
the week didn't either. So we're both 0 for 1 on our lock of the week because I decided to go
Uh,
with the Minnesota Vikings, who I feel like you can typically count on, especially when they're in their home building. We
yeah.
absolutely blasted the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on our show
Blasted them.
viewing the season. And what do? Week one on the road, Baker Mayfield and company go in and steal a win. I mean, this was one that I just did not see coming. Guess you got to give the Bucks a little bit of credit. Maybe Todd Bowles a little bit of credit. Again, we blasted him just as we blasted the entire Bucks team. But Mike Evans suited up, wound up having a pretty big
Quite
impact in
well.
this game. And for the Vikings, there was a lot of talk about how they were going to take a step back because last year they won so many close games. It was like something that could not be duplicated
Yep.
for another year. And clearly, it's not a good start because they lost this game. They followed that up, which we'll get to,
We'll
the
get to
Thursday
that.
night affair in Philly. So they're already off to an 0-2 start. My pick to win the NFC North, the division that we had completely different in all our picks 1 through 4. For the Vikings at home to lay that stinker against the Bucks, that was a big letdown.
Yeah, it's the only division at the moment in the NFC North I'm feeling good about here through week one in a Thursday night game because I had them in third place and missing the playoffs. Did I have them winning this game? Of course. I mean, we were. I still, again, week one's a weird. I'm still not believing the Bucks are a good team, and I still think they're
No,
finishing
no,
in fourth
no, no,
place.
no, no.
I'm not going to back off that pick through week one. But for this game, very surprising. And hats off to the coaches and Mayfield and all of them. I mean, they played with some energy, but to me, this game is more about the Vikings. I mean, this is a poor performance, and honestly, it's not even a poor performance in terms from Kirk. Kirk has actually had two great games to start off the season.
Yes,
It's just like they've gotten off
yes.
to these slow starts. They've definitely had this fumble issue, which has been weird going
Mm.
on. And I think, what do they have, like 7 turnovers as a team now to start the season? That's been the Achilles heel. And you know what? For all the stuff and the respect that I have for Brian Flores as the defensive coordinator, I mean, there's just not a lot of talent on this defense. It's just not good. I mean, let's just be real. It was 31st in the league last year for a reason. It doesn't look any better really this year. And they couldn't make stops when they needed to. The offense doesn't help with turning the ball over, and it's a disappointing start for this team to start the season. But particularly focusing on this week one game, it's not looking good. And I said this to you off camera and even on camera. Don't just think you could put Alexander Madison in and think it's Dalvin Cook. It doesn't work like that. And we're seeing that here between fumble issues, and he's not the same type of receiver out of the backfield. There's just not the same juice there. To me, it's only a couple games they've played, but to me, he's a backup. He's a two. He's not a starting running back, and that's how I see it. Now, I can't also ignore, of course, I'm sure you saw the horrible things people were sending to him after the Thursday night game. I mean, that was disgusting. That is never, I don't care how bad or who's on your fantasy team, there's never a place in life to speak like that. People should be ashamed of themselves. I just can't believe people say things like that publicly on their public accounts. It's just wild to me. But for me as a player, I just don't think that's going to cut it there. Jefferson's as good as advertised. He's amazing. But this Vikings team, it's very much like the football gods again. I feel like I'm a priest so far here on the show, but when you win 11 score games last year, you kind of come back to the median the next year. That's just kind of how it works. And now they've been in 2 losses of 1 score games. And it just seems like, there's a way that the NFL and the NFL gods have of balancing this out. And I'm sure you want to talk about the Bucks. I mean, you're kind of wearing a little bit of Bucks colors going on there a little bit. I mean, how shocked were you to see Baker Mayfield on an opening day performance on the road get the win?
I mean, I was floored. When you have your lock of the week, you tend to be pretty confident going in that it's going to go one way. Especially like as we talked about, neither of us were drinking any Bucks Kool-Aid coming into this season, so the performance very much surprised me. But one point that I want to make on the Vikings before we move on and get to some other picks. Um, you have a team last year where their defense was as bad as it was. You would think there would be more of an effort to upgrade the talent on that side. Like, I get it, they made the change at coordinator and brought in Brian Flores,
Yep.
but that's a team that they should have looked at themselves in the draft. You would think your first rounder, your focus would be defense, not adding another wide receiver, Jordan Addison, who
Yeah.
has played
He's
decently through
played
the first
well.
couple of games. He has. But was that really the need for the Vikings? The need was on the other side of the ball where their defense is just not competitive.
No, you're 100% right. Right now, just as you saying that, well, let's pull up their draft picks from this past draft here, right? They go Jordan Addison. He looks pretty good. You get someone opposite, kind of on the side of Jefferson after kind of Thielen leaves town. That I totally get. But then you don't have a second round pick. You come back in the third round. They get a corner, right? A USC. They get a senior Blackman. He's a cornerback there. Okay. They went safety. They went nose tackle. So their top three picks after the first round, the third, the fourth, and the fifth round were all defensive players. Now, are those top end guys? Maybe not, but I think to me it was more you had to do something in free agency, and they didn't
Yeah.
make those moves. Hunter's still there. It's not like Peterson's really, he's out the door. That nothing's going on there. Like you need star players. I mean, I think we could say that the days of when they had just guys in their prime of Kendricks and Zadarius Smith and Harrison Smith and like those days are gone. I mean, they're not the same anymore. And this
Jared Allen too.
Jared Allen as well. If you want to go way back, like it's just this defense is a shell of themselves, and it's been like that for 2 or 3 years right now. So I do agree with you on that front of why hasn't there been more investment on that side of the ball when you know it was a problem and it's just not done. I mean, look at these names. All right, Danielle Hunter is a name, right? But Dean
Mm.
Lowry, Harrison Phillips, okay, he's a draft pick. Jonathan Bullard, they get in there. I mean, he's not really making any moves. You bring in Marcus Davenport from the Saints, but how much was he moving the needle for all the draft resources that they gave up for him in New Orleans is the reason why he's not there. Jordan Hicks, I've never been super high on. Evans is at corner. Brian Murphy Jr. Harrison Smith is not the same player that he once was. I mean, there's not really anyone that screams, "Oh, this is a super talented roster on the defensive side of the ball," and it's hurt them through 2 weeks. It has.
Yeah.
Brian,
Yeah,
what?
and I
No.
I was just gonna say, and I feel like they have enough on offense, especially with Hawkinson now at tight end. He caught 2 touchdowns on Thursday night. Like you mentioned, it, Cousins is playing good football
Oh,
right
really
now,
good.
but it's the turnovers and it's the defense that
Yeah,
has done them in.
I don't think, of course, this team's not going to go 0-17. They'll get it back, on course. But is going 0-2, you get 11% chance historically of making the playoffs. So I know it's the NFC, but that's going to be an uphill climb there.
Yeah.
Brian, I want to go to probably a game we have to talk about, probably the most exciting game of Week 1. This was Dolphins Chargers. Okay, I mean
Mm,
there was
yeah.
points, points, points. I mean things. The ball was flying in this game, and it comes down to kind of the end of the game, last minute of the game, exactly what you want from this type of game. But Brian, and I feel like you have been more outspoken, and now the 3+ years we've been doing this now. The Chargers are one of these teams that just cannot make the right play or
No.
decision or kick, whatever it is, whether coaching wise or the guys that are playing the game on the field. When it comes down to it, no matter how good of a game they play, it's just like they cannot get over the hump, particularly against other really good teams. And we see that here in Week 1. So I'll focus more on Miami when I get to my point, but I want to go to you. There's a lot of good things here from the Chargers, particularly on offense, but they don't win again when the game's on the line there at the end of the game. What are you feeling after Week 1 on this team?
Well, again, we talked going into the season that it was like this has to be the time for the Chargers to shine. Like if it's
Absolutely.
not now, when is it going to happen? And after week 1, it feels like same old Chargers again. Now they've got a lot of time to get it right, but signs early are not good. Like Austin Eckler, it looks like he's going to miss this game
Yes,
coming
he's
up in
confirmed out.
Tennessee, so he's out. And it just it's really frustrating because the team has so much talent. Everybody loves Justin Herbert and the things he's able to do, but you have to be able to do the little things, and the Chargers just have had this inability to. I don't know if it falls on Brandon Staley just not being a good enough coach. Is
Partially.
Justin Herbert just not a clutch quarterback? Is it just this kind of dark cloud that is hanging over the organization for as long as it has? But whatever the case, it just feels like it's a team that cannot get out of its own way. But this game, I feel like we forecasted it very accurately. Like I remember we both said a lot of points scored. I thought the Chargers were going to win by 1 point, and it looked like I had a chance to be right. They had the ball.
Had
If
it.
they got a field goal, it would have been a 1 point win.
Yep.
But in typical Chargers fashion, they came up short, and Herbert really got outplayed by Tua in a big time. I mean, Tua played maybe the game of his life. The weapons that he has at his disposal, Miami was just lighting it up, and they win.
Yeah, I just think, before I get to the Dolphins, the Chargers, is it partially Brandon Staley? Absolutely. But you know what? You bring a Kellen Moore offensive coordinator. His whole thing was about passing the ball down the field. He doesn't do that. It's very around the line of scrimmage. I understand, people said throughout the week they played Vic Fangio. He's very much about keeping the too high safety. They're playing super far back. They don't want any of the deep shots. Fine. But then take what you have in front of you. And they did great with the run game. They almost rushed for what? Almost 200 yards in this game. Even Joshua Kelly, the running back, the backup running back, does great. But this is just the Chargers, right? Like Eckler has a fantastic game. He's by far, to me, their most consistent weapon. But you know what he's also consistent with? Being injured. And here, week
Mm.
2, we're about to be in, and he's already out of the game, hurts his ankle. And it's just like, this is what happens. Mike Williams got hurt in this game. Now, he came back. He's going to play in week 2, but he got banged up. It's like they are another team in this league, whether it's like the Eagles or them, or like just the Ravens are a big team. We'll talk about them. Just these teams that have these injury bugs, particularly them and the Ravens, the Chargers and the Ravens. And I just don't
Yeah.
understand it. Is it just unlucky? Is it the training staffs are just not doing what they're supposed to, or they just have a compilation of just guys that are just injury prone, like it just happens? There's too much talent. Now Herbert's the second biggest, highest paid player in football after Burrow's deal. I said on the prediction show, I said this is the year. This is the year you have to win a playoff game. Like, you need to show me something. All the talent is there. You're incredible. Everyone would take you. You would be one of the guys taken if we were doing a redraft. So many teams would take Justin Herbert. He has all the physical attributes. He passed for 229 yards. I mean, Tua passed for almost 250 yards more than he did.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's not good enough. And I understand you were taking what you could give you because they almost ran the ball for 200 yards. I get that. But when the game comes down at the end of the line, Jason Sanders misses an extra point. You can just drive the field and have an intentional grounding there that basically ruined that last drive. And then, they get pressured, he gets sacked, the game's over. It's those little mistakes that cannot happen, and they always happen to this Chargers team. And this defense, for everything that Brandon Staley, all the magic he worked in LA, his specialty is defense, of course. This defense in 2 years that he's been there, or this is what, his third year now, has looked atrocious.
Yeah.
Awful. And there is
Yeah.
Bosa and Mack, and there is so many good guys. I mean, for all the money they spent on J.C. Jackson, the man was getting torched in that secondary. There's supposed to be a lot of talent on this defense, and it has massively underperformed. I think they're one of the most disappointing units in the last year and a half now. But they have to perform better. They're in for a huge week 2. Like, they need to win. But to flip it to the other side, Brian, because the Dolphins deserve the credit. I said this, I think you said this as well. This is why I was pretty high on the Dolphins. Tua can stay healthy, which is a massive if, which is what we both said.
Yeah.
He's a good quarterback, and in
Yeah.
Mike McDaniel's system, Mike McDaniel's every week proves that he's a damn good coach. Okay, like the schemes he was putting on this team of getting the wide receivers started before the snap to get them some momentum so they could take off. You got speed guys in this team. You have the fastest player in football, maybe in NFL history, like in actual pads on the field in Tyreek Hill. They are using all their players to full advantage. Waddle didn't even do anything crazy. I think he had like 74 yards. Tyreek Hill, that was one of the most dominating wide receiver performances I've ever seen. And honestly, the other one that really comes to mind is when he played the Bucks when he was on the
Yeah.
Chiefs a few years ago and had like
Yeah.
200 yards in the first quarter. I mean, this guy
Yeah.
is incredible. And
Yes.
they say he's not the most polished route runner. Who cares? If he could do that, who cares if he could run past secondary members, double teamed, no problem. I mean, I'm imagining you were blown away by what the Dolphins did in week 1.
Yeah, I don't see how you couldn't be. I mean, this offense is just so fun to watch. I mean, not really for me as a Jet fan, but as an objective viewer, the Dolphins are just an exciting football team. I mean, if
Yeah.
they can keep Tua healthy with the weapons that he has, I mean, Tyreek Hill is just playing at such an elite level. Like this is what a Hall of Fame player looks like.
Yeah.
It's what we're watching with Tyreek
He's
Hill.
he's gonna be, yeah.
Yeah, but I think we get caught up in the Hall of Fame where a lot of guys get in where it's like yeah, they were good, but were they great? Like to me, the Hall of Fame, I'm a close door, whatever the saying is for Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
I'm a small hall guy. That's the term. But Tyreek Hill, he fits the bill. I mean, he's just that good of a player, and it's going to be interesting. Miami and their next game, they've got the Patriots, which was a team that all the years Brady was there. That was kind of the one team that seemed to be able to beat the
For sure.
Patriots with any sort of consistency, if you'd even call it that. So I'm interested to see how they're going to do coming up tomorrow night.
Yeah, that's going to be some fun when we get to those picks. But this game was amazingly exciting. I loved every second of it, and I'm so glad that we got to watch it. Bri, for another game this week, do you have another interesting pick? Because I always love when you pick a game. Is there any other place you want to go to?
Yeah, well, I don't really think it's worth spending too much time on the Cowboys Giants. I mean, that was just a
No, it was.
total
I,
annihilation.
I didn't
Uh,
expect it to be that bad. Let's put it that way.
No, and the funny thing was just quickly was how the Giants the first drive they're moving the ball and putting together an impressive looking drive. Barkley's running it, Jones is running it. They're eating up yardage on the ground, and then next thing you know, you get the field goal blocked, taken the other way for a touchdown, and the Giants were just completely taken out of the game. I mean, they had nothing the whole way. The other play that was big was obviously Barkley getting the ball knocked out of his hands. That gets taken for 6 points the other way, and the Giants just had nothing going. I mean, the offensive line could not protect Daniel Jones. It was just as one sided could be with the Cowboys defense just manhandling the Giants offensive line. But one game that was kind of interesting to touch on just quickly, the Eagles and the Patriots.
Yeah, very exciting
Uh,
actually.
Final score 25-20. I think you actually said when we were doing the picks you thought this game would be on the closer side. It kind of looked like the Eagles were about ready to jump out, have a big lead, and blow them out of the water. And the Patriots kind of hung around. I mean, I think Mac Jones deserves some credit, a guy who doesn't really get a lot of credit. I mean, we
No.
don't think very highly of the Patriots on offense, but he held his own. They were able to keep up, and I mean, the Eagles were not playing their A game, neither were they on Thursday night. So I think it's fair to say that through two games, the Eagles definitely have some question marks.
For sure.
But this game, I'm curious to get your takeaway from.
Yeah, I mean, basically, it was a game. It was two different games inside of one. You have all the hoopla with Tom Brady before the game, right? And then the Eagles kind of, due to some turnovers and stuff, they take a 16-0 lead. It's like, oh Lord, here comes the avalanche. Here comes the slaughter. This is gonna be so embarrassing. Belichick is on that continual climb to tie and pass Don Shula in career wins. You got Tom Brady in the house. This is not good. You got the Super Bowl runner-up, and then all of a sudden the game kind of shifts after that. And the Patriots, outscore them 20-9. They kind of dominate them after that, and it was a really fascinating game. And I actually was thoroughly impressed by Mac Jones. Crazy thing here, Bri. When you give a young quarterback an actual offensive coordinator, it's crazy what they might be able to do. It's insane that they thought that they could honestly go, and I don't care how many times I say it, that they thought maybe it was arrogance, maybe it was stupidity, maybe it was both. They thought they could have a defensive staff coach offense last year. I mean, I'll never get over how that's actually a thing. But regardless, you bring in Bill O'Brien. It actually looked like Mac was back to his rookie year. He was making competent throws. He looked like he had the timing of the offense. Kendrick Bourne looked like a nice, solid find. He was having a great game out there. Ramondre Stevenson was doing a little bit in the run, but more in the pass. And they actually looked like a solid kind of offensive unit where at the end of the game, they're driving to win it. I mean, remember
Yeah.
they're on the Eagles side of the field, and really, I forget who it was. I don't think it was Bourne. I forget who it was. They didn't get 2 feet in bounds at the end of the game on fourth down. If they did it, they initially called it a catch, but then they looked at it and that was it. That gets caught. They're inside the 20-yard line, and now with about a minute and 40 left, they get a chance to get a touchdown and win that game right there. So I was thoroughly impressed with the Patriots. I think that defense is going to be as good as ever. That's not too much of a shock, but I think they even outperform my expectations. And then I think Mac Jones and that offense now with the Jets, the way that went, You never know what could happen. God willing, hopefully he's all right, but you never know what could happen with Tua. The Bills are slipping a little bit there. I mean, hey, maybe the Patriots sneak out 9 wins and maybe start talking about a 7 seed. I mean, you never know. I mean, we'll see how
Not
week
out of
two
the
goes.
question.
But I don't think it's
Yeah.
out of the question. I came away from that game, man, I have questions about the Eagles. Definitely feel that way even after Thursday. And wow, actually kind of shocked the way that I predicted it'd be close, but I thought it'd be more of a defensive game. I didn't think Mac would throw for over 300 yards. Hats off to him in that offense, dealing with, kind of limited weapons. Good game. But I also, before we go to our picks, I mean, I think it's just fair. We talked about the Jets. You mentioned it earlier. Let's talk about my team. Let's talk about the Rams. Maybe the shock of the weekend.
Yeah.
Definitely shocked me. Definitely shocked a lot of rational Ram fans. I mean, of course, there's always delusional people in every kind of fan base, but I don't think anyone. I think what was the spread before this game? Maybe 6.5 to 8.5. I saw. I mean, like you're up in Seattle. Seattle team that made the playoffs last year is a damn good team. Way more talent than the Rams. Rams, the youngest team in football. How's Stafford going to respond? He missed 9 games last year. He had back and neck issues. Cooper Kupp's on the IR. I mean, what's going to happen here? And the Rams go up to Seattle, Bry, and not win, dominate the Seahawks. I mean, in the second half, the Seahawks at one point had 3 yards. That's it. I mean, it was
Three.
thorough domination of what it was. One of the more shock games I've ever watched as an actual Ram fan, and was thoroughly enjoyable, of course. Brian, what was your takeaway if either watching that game or maybe catching the score later and going, "What the hell happened here?"
Yeah, it was definitely one that you looked at with a raised eyebrow for sure. And I mean, we sat here and I listened to you go on a good 10-minute tirade about how the team was going to be terrible this year, and maybe they still will.
Week
Like
one's
we
a weird.
talked about, week one definitely does have some fluky, wacky results. But like with Cup out, it created opportunity for some other guys, and I think the one who became kind of a known name after week one was this Puka wide receiver, which
Puka
you
Nakuka.
can tell me his last name. Yeah, the rookie fifth round pick who had a huge game.
Huge.
So I mean, he deserves a lot of credit. But Stafford, for those conditions, like you mentioned, how
Incredible.
much time he missed, the offensive line that was a patchwork group at best going in, and for him to sit back and have one of his best games as a Ram was really quite something.
Yeah, for me, with all the odds stacked against them in a regular season game, maybe including the playoffs, but I'll just say regular season. To me, that's his best game as a Ram, at least regular season wise. Like that was just an incredible, incredible performance. And remember, he doesn't even throw a touchdown pass in this game, but to have no turnovers, to know when to get rid of the ball, he doesn't get sacked in this game. The offensive line is all over the place. I mean, you sign Noteboom as your left tackle, but that hasn't worked out, we see, so we put Jackson in there. You slide Noteboom over to right guard. Havenstein's been your only kind of stalwart there, the guy that's only been consistent at right tackle. Coleman Shelton has played some center, but now this is his first full-time action. You got a rookie in Steve Avila playing at left guard, and they were the group that deserves the most credit between them and Stafford. I mean, they were incredible. They controlled the line of scrimmage. I mean, they're in for a massive test here in week two. But for what they did there, I thought was incredibly impressive. And for Donald, it was kind of the two veterans, right? Stafford and Donald on each side of the ball, leading the young kids, showing them how to win in a hostile environment. We saw rookie Byron Young there at defensive end making some plays there, especially toward the end of the game. Donald gets a sack, which Seattle's the team he has the most sacks of in his career. And to have that game go the way it did for Puka and Tutu Atwell, both to go for 119 yards each, a second-round pick in Tutu Atwell, who has looked like an absolute bust through his first 2 years, when you actually utilize him and get him going, kind of, he's nowhere near Tyreek Hill, but in the same ideas of kind of maybe McVay was looking at a little bit of Mike McDaniels in the offseason, getting him going before the snap actually is, getting him run around the line so he kind of, a smaller guy could kind of cement him, and some pick plays to go around. I thought was really, really smart. Higbee solid as ever. Van Jefferson, he even dropped that one like 50-yard bomb. It could have even been more damage going on. I was thoroughly impressed with the defense. I was thoroughly impressed with the offense. And Stafford, that was an incredible game. I mean, I could have never predicted that. Kyron Williams, him and Cam looked great as a 1-2 punch there, and Kyron in his second year. I can't say enough about what McVay did up there, getting those guys ready to play. And you know, I'm very nervous for week 2, but what a hell of a performance there in week 1, and uh, just otherworldly it felt to me.
Yeah. So I think with that said, we should dive into week 2. What do you think?
Let's do week 2, Brian. Let's go over to that Thursday night game. We mentioned it a couple times here just because of the nature of what we were talking about. But Eagles, Vikings, right? Eagles end up getting the victory in this one. The Vikings dropped to 0-2. A close game and ends up covering the spread, so I end up getting it right there, 34-28. But what happened again, Brian? It's the Vikings and turnovers, and they get behind in this game. Cousins plays another fantastic game. I mean, not only stats wise, but like the game was close. They had a chance there at the end, but the fumbles have been a killer for this team early on. And now they've dug themselves in a situation where, as I mentioned before, about 11% of teams make the playoffs when they start 0-2. Jefferson, you have to wonder how long with the contract situation there. He's played fantastic. Does there start being rumblings there? Maybe. You hope not. I think that you have something in Hawkinson. We know his talent, but this defensive side of the ball, as we talked about earlier, it's not good. And for me, I'm also wondering about Kirk Cousins. Kind of in the last year here, probably going to be a free agent. I doubt that. I don't know if they're going to re-sign him. Maybe. Do the Vikings want to go in a different direction? I mean, it depends how the season goes. It's going to be a lot of talk here going throughout the season and into the offseason for the Vikings. But since we talked about them, I do want to talk more about the Eagles. They haven't looked great. I mean, credit to them. They're 2-0. Awesome. They haven't looked that great here through 2 weeks, Brian. And then you have that whole fight on the sideline between A.J. Brown and Hurts and Sirianni's kind of weird response to it after the game, and that seems to be a brewing situation. What'd you make of the Eagles, even in the win here on Thursday night?
Yeah, well, the thing with the Brown situation is like I saw that and I'm just thinking just another diva wide receiver. I mean, like how many of these guys are out there? The guy has a huge year last year, comes over in the trade. It was the trade of the year and comes out in week 2. The team is 1-0. They have the lead. He's not getting the ball and he starts getting cranky. Like, I mean, it's really a bit much, honestly,
I
with
would
with
agree.
some of these wide receivers. But yeah, I mean, look, the Eagles have not played their best, but the bottom line is they're 2-0. So I think that's really what matters most. It's hard to be consistent, like as good as they were last year, and you come in with a similar team on paper. Yes, 2 new coordinators, but it's not just as easy as, oh, we got the same team, we're going to run off another 14-win season. Like things change from one year to the next. Jalen Hurts might not be as efficient. I mean, he had a pretty decent game on Thursday, but he's not a guy where it's like Mahomes, where he's a given that he's going to be an elite quarterback. I mean, look, he's a very good player, but he's not a slam dunk. I don't think you can say. I think there is still some figuring out to do with the Eagles. I mean, the one positive from or one of the positives from Thursday was DeAndre Swift, who we both were high on,
Thank you.
right? Said he
Jesus,
was going to
thank
be
you.
a good fit for this offense. Week 1 against New England, he basically doesn't see the field. And then week 2, they decide, oh, Kenneth Gainwell not going to play. Let's actually use
Oh,
Swift.
yeah, we
And what
have this
happened?
guy. Yeah, let's use him.
Career game. Goes out 170 yards, a touchdown. He's catching the ball out of the backfield. It looked like the best player on the field. So, a way to, wake up and find him, as Dallas Goedert was another one not used at all in week 1. We know he's a very good pass catching tight end.
Hmm.
So, I think the Eagles are going to be fine. They're not playing their best, but the takeaway is they're 2-0. That's what matters.
Absolutely, and that's exactly where I was going to go with Swift. I understand he's had fumbling issues in the past. I understand that, but like you spend a fourth round pick on this guy, like in the trade, use him. It doesn't take till Kenneth Gainwell is out and he's not playing in this game for you then to realize, oh yeah, we have this guy who almost ran for 200 yards on Thursday night. Like He's talented. Give him a chance, both out of the backfield catching it and of course rushing the ball. And I hope that this maybe is a wake up call. I mean, it was weird still with Sirianni. Like, he makes the comment of like, there's some weeks it's going to be like that, and other weeks, be more like week one. Like, what are you talking about? Like, how are you not going to use this guy as a weapon? Like, I don't know. I think it's a way bigger of a deal there, and you see it through 2 weeks of not having both those coordinators. I think that's going to be a big issue because that front of the Eagles defense has looked great. That back end has looked bad. So like there's a disconnect going on there. They haven't played great. And Hurts, I think it's worth mentioning. This was some people's kind of dark horse, or straight up MVP pick. He hasn't passed for 200 yards in either of these two games. So the offensive passing game has been slow. And the Brown, I understand you're a heavy competitor. You always think that could contribute to winning in such a dramatic way, but the diva wide receiver thing I'm very over. Like, we're
Yeah.
2 weeks into the season and we're already complaining about getting the ball, and he's not the only one that we've seen through the first week plus now. But like, stop. Like, you're making things harder for your quarterback, where he is going to potentially throw more interceptions because he's going to force feed the ball because you complain about it, and it's going to be a detriment to your team winning the game. Stop.
And
Just
and they've got a guy on the other side,
who went over
Devontae
100
Smith,
yards.
budding superstar in the game.
Yeah.
I mean, you just gotta love his game. Watching the way he runs routes, catching the deep ball, he's gonna be a big time player.
Yeah, to me, it makes more sense if Sirianni was like, yes, some weeks it's going to be Smith, and some weeks it's going to be Brown of the guy who goes off. Not saying that in the conjunction about DeAndre Swift. So there's a little bit of rumblings there, but as you said, winning cures everything, right? You're 2-0, so that's all that matters, and it's a better feeling there than surely that the Vikings are feeling right now. But shout out to Jordan Addison. Really like how he's played. And the other nugget I wanted to add before we go to our week 2 picks, thought it was one of the crazier stats I've read so far this season. How does Justin Jefferson, at 24 years old, now have more total career receiving yards than any receiver in the history of the Chicago Bears franchise? That doesn't make any sense to me. Like,
Wow.
I just don't understand how that's even real. Like, I mean, they've been around for what, 100, 400, 5 years, something like that. They've in the entire history of the franchise, they've never had a receiver have more yards than Justin Jefferson. I mean, that is not only shows you the greatness of Jefferson, but also shows you, like, the Bears do not how to do offense. They don't even have a 4,000-yard passer in their career. I mean, like, they don't know what the hell's going on over there. So we'll see how their season plays. But, Bri, let's go into some picks here for week 2. Week 1 is wacky. We saw, some weird performances, some great performances. But we're going to settle it back down in week 2. We both picked the Eagles there to start week 2. We're both correct in that regard. Let's go to the 1 o'clock games here on Sunday, Bri. Packers, Falcons, two teams that played pretty well. I think Jordan Love kind of showed out a little bit. I think he had the highest QB rating of week 1. 3 touchdowns, no picks. Falcons did exactly what I expected them to do. Almost had 200-yard rushers. Just ran the ball down the throat there against Carolina. We're in Atlanta here, but I'm taking the Packers in this one. I really like the vibe of this team. I like what Love is not being asked to do too much. They also run the ball really effectively. And I think at the end of the day, I think they have a little bit better of a defense than this Falcons team. I don't necessarily trust Desmond Ridder when he's not targeting Drake London, when he's only giving 2 passes to Kyle Pitts. That was also, you want to talk about weird coaching comments. Arthur Smith going, they asked him, like, kind of in a joking but serious way, like, how did Desmond Ridder have more catches than Drake London? Because, of course, the ball was tipped up and Desmond Ridder caught his own pass. And then he just said, oh, Drake is completely, fine with that. It doesn't matter, blah, blah, blah. It's like, I kind of think it matters that one of your best offensive assets didn't get a single target. I think that kind of matters, but regardless. So for that, I think the Falcons, I picked them to win this division, but I think the Packers will win this game. What say you?
Yeah, I'm riding Green Bay too. I'm not necessarily feeling great about having them as my last place finisher in the NFC North.
Which
Neither am
one?
I feeling good about the Bears to finish in second, but that's beside the point. No, I think Green Bay, very impressed with what they did in week 1, putting up 38 points. Now they get an Atlanta defense that we don't really think all that highly of. I think it's a pretty close game, but I like the Packers get to 2-0.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be a solid game. I'm really excited for that one. Raiders Bills, Bry. I mean, to me, I don't think there's a ton to talk about. I mean, hey, props off to the Raiders. They play the Broncos really well. They won a 1 point game there in Week 1 on the road. Garoppolo played well. There's all the hoopla about he's the one of the most winning quarterbacks when he starts in NFL history, right? Over 70%. But still, this Raiders team is really not that good. I mean, let's just be honest, they're not. And if this Bills team, which I'm picking the Bills, of course, if this Bills team at home, after they all the stuff that we talked about in Week 1 there on Monday night with the Jets losing Rodgers, they lose at home to the Las Vegas Raiders. I'm telling you right now, you'll think I'm crazy. You will start hearing some whispers about Sean McDermott's job. I'm telling you right now
Yeah.
that it won't happen, not yet, but you will hear those whispers after Week 2. What do you think about this game? Who are you picking?
Well, I agree that if they were to somehow lose, there would be a lot of panic. It would be straight up panic and everywhere Bills. But this is the game that I think we're gonna cue the music, which maybe sometime we'll get to a little jingle for the lock of the
Maybe we'll
week.
get that
But
going.
this is my lock of the week. I like the Bills to bounce back in a big way. A few of the AFC powers, I think it's kind of a theme going into week 2, starting 0-1, the big quarterbacks, right? Like the Chiefs 0-1, Cincinnati, lackluster week 1,
Allen,
Bills,
yeah.
which we documented. So I think the Bills at home against a Raider defense that just isn't going to be able to stop their passing game the way the Jets did. I think it's a big game for all the Bills pass catchers, Diggs, Gabe Davis. I think Allen bounces back in a big way, plays turnover-free football, and the Bills get a resounding victory.
I agree, but they better hope so. One of the great games that I'm looking forward to this weekend is Ravens Bengals. I love this rivalry. Lamar has played historically excellent in these games against the Bengals here. They kind of won a little bit tougher than I expected game against the Texans there in Week 1. Cincinnati coming off of maybe one of the most worst offensive performances in the Joe Burrow era. I mean, they were terrible. I mean, 82 yards after you sign that contract. I understand that he is like 1-5 against Cleveland in his career. There's a reason why I picked the Browns to win in Week 1, but not to perform that poorly. They need a bounce back week. And with the Ravens offense that kind of seems a little bit clunky, Lamar didn't look that great. He was constantly holding the ball kind of a little haphazardly and dropping it, and there was almost potential turnovers there. I'm taking the Bengals for a huge bounce back week at home against the Ravens. I think this game is going to be very close, but I see the Bengals out on top, maybe like a 30-27 kind of thing.
Yeah, I'd like to disagree just to make it a little more interesting conversation, but I'm riding the Bengals as well. Ravens, again, we talked about the injuries. J.K. Dobbins already hurt, lost for the season. It's just a
Yep.
shame for a young player that
Feel
has so
bad for
much
him, man.
talent, right? That just doesn't seem like he's going to be able to have any kind of consistent pro career. But I'm riding these AFC quarterbacks to bounce back in week 2, and for the Bengals, I'm going to chalk it up as a fluky week 1 result against a team that somehow has their number. I think Burrow bounces back. I mean, somehow T. Higgins was a player who had no catches
Yeah,
last
it was
week.
rough.
I'm gonna give him, 7 or 8 catches this week, over 100 yards. You got Jamar Chase, you got a bevy of weapons. I think the Cincinnati offense looks much more like itself and has enough firepower to take down its division rival.
I agree. I understand that was one of the two bad weather games of the weekend, the other one being the Cowboys Giants. But you got to play better than that. 3 points, under 100 yards passing. Terrible. I expect them to bounce back. And as you said, and as we talked about, the Ravens, Ronnie Stanley hurt. Andrews didn't play in week 1. Questionable if he's going to play in week 2. Dobbins, of course, as you said, out for the year. I don't understand this Ravens team is hurt every single year. I just don't get it. It's one of the reasons why I picked them in third place and to miss the playoffs. They're going to be an uphill climb if they keep mounting injuries. Brian, the Seahawks Lions, as we talked about the Seahawks, one of the shocks of the weekend being knocked off by the Rams at home. They go into Detroit, which I don't know if you saw this is the first time in like 2 decades the Lions have sold out this stadium. It is going to
Wow.
be a madhouse in there tomorrow. I mean, crazy the amount of blue and silver that you are going to see. This at Ford Field is going to be a hostile environment for a team to come into. I just I don't know what to expect out of Seattle. It doesn't look now that Both they're really like kind of all pro, Pro Bowl level caliber tackles on each side. Do not look like they're playing here in week two. They both got hurt against the Rams. That's not going to be a great thing in a hostile environment. I have to wonder. I had high hopes for Geno. He looked really bad there in week one. Was it a week one fluke? I don't know. You saw a lot of the Seahawks also. You want to talk about diva receivers. You saw Metcalf also being a little bit of a diva at the end of the game last week. Took a couple dirty shots at some Rams players, and even hurting one there at the end of the game when the game was already decided. So for me, I'm believing in the Lions, man. I picked the Lions to win this division. I said it was going to be a close game there against the Chiefs, and I'm picking them to win this game. Can I see Seattle winning? Sure, but in this environment, in Ford Field, the way this crowd is going to be, I think the Lions are going to live up to the billing, and I think they're going to win.
Yeah, I'm going Lions too. I think it's going to be a close game. I'd say probably a field goal game. But yeah, I mean, you had to like a lot about their game in Kansas City. Both sides of the ball, like their defense actually looked
It's
pretty
underrated.
good, particularly in the secondary. They got a nice tandem at running back, the rookie Gibbs and the pounder with Montgomery. I like those two. Amon Ra looks like a number one wide receiver now, bona fide player at the position. I think the Lions are going to be better than I thought forecasting going into the season. I think in their home opener, raucous environment, all the pieces are there for a win here to get them to 2-0.
Yeah, it's an exciting game. I'm looking forward to that one. The game that is going to kind of be boring is Colts Texans. I'm taking the Colts in this one. I actually thought Anthony Richardson was pretty damn impressive last week as a rookie. In opening game one there. Do I agree that he needs to stop running it even as big as he is? Yes, because he kind of got banged up at the end of the game and Minshew had to come in for a series. He needs to stop doing that, but I actually think there's Pittman played way better than I thought he would. He played more like a one than a two, is what I called him. And with the whole Taylor situation looming over them, I still think the Colts are going to have a little bit more talent here this season than the Texans. Didn't really like the Texans' performance there in Week One, and I think Indy's going to go into Houston and get the win
Yeah, I mean, this is one of those you can flip a coin.
for
I
sure.
wouldn't really feel good either way. By the way, like CJ Stroud, I think is questionable, so he might not even play, which I believe means Davis Mills is next in line there on the quarterback depth chart. So, you know what? I'm just going to be different for the heck of it and take Houston at
That's fair.
home. I don't really have a great reason, uh, but yeah, let's go Texans.
Yeah, he's still. I'm looking at as of now. He's still questionable with a shoulder injury. Do not want that as your rookie, highly drafted QB going into week two. Not really great. Maybe the game of the weekend, Brian, is going to be Chiefs Jags. I mean, this is a huge game. Chiefs, of course, a shocking 0-1. Jags with a nice performance there, holding on against Indy, playing really well, winning by 10 ultimately. And this is a rematch of the divisional round. I picked the Jags as my number one seed this year. I think they're going to play really, really well throughout the season while kind of all the other AFC powers beat up on each other. But I'm going to take the Chiefs here to bounce back in this one. Kelsey is expected to start. They made the contract signing with Chris Jones, which kind of looks like it was a detriment to him. It doesn't really look like he got anything great out of that. But he's also reportedly will play in this game. I think with their two big horses on each side of the ball back, I think they're not going to be kind of rusty. I think they'll be up to snuff, and I see the Chiefs going into Jacksonville, pulling this one out in a really exciting game.
I actually thought you were going to go Jacksonville, so you surprised me a little bit there. I too am going Kansas City. I feel like outside of quarterbacks, Travis Kelce might be the most
You said that.
indispensable player in the game. And you just looked at the way they played in the season opener against Detroit. Without him, Mahomes to throw to, it just did not look like the same offense. Like he brings a dynamic that is just elite. And even if he's not 100%, it's still a huge boost to this offense. I think that reason more than anything else, the fact that he's going to be on the field gives me enough confidence that the Chiefs will bounce back. I couldn't really wrap my head around the fact that the Chiefs could be 0-2, so I think they're going to win to even up the record.
Yeah, I mean they wouldn't be dead in the water if they were 0-2, but still it wouldn't be great. And I just have to believe Kadarius Toney is not going to have another worst game of his life. And Kelsey, as you said, even not healthy, he brings a calmness and a stability, a reliability to that offense that Mahomes really relies on. Look, hey, the first game Mahomes ever played that Kelsey was not in was a loss. So there's a connection between those two that is unspeakable, and I expect them to kind of even up the record this week. A game that I wouldn't say was that intriguing before week one, but now might be a little bit intriguing is Bears Bucks. I'm kind of fascinated a little bit in this game because the Bears, all the hype that they had, which I don't think either of us bought into, especially me. I know you had the Bears a little bit high there in your divisional rankings, but gave kind of a dud performance. Justin Fields at some point, I know your offense doesn't have all pros on your team, but DJ Moore is still enough. The Claypool trade looks like a disaster. I mean, he doesn't even look like he
Yeah.
wants. He looks like he's quitting when he's out there. I mean, like I saw
Yeah.
several clips of him just not even trying. So who knows what happens with there? But the Bucks kind of shocked me there in week one, the way that they played. I think they're going to come back to earth a little bit. I think the Bears are going to pull this one out on the road. I don't expect highly of them. I still have them as a fourth place team, but I also don't have any respect for Tampa as well. And I kind of see this game being a real down and dirty slugfest. Maybe another 2017 game here for the Bucks, but I see them being on the wrong side of it this time, taking the Bears.
Yeah, I'm hoping that we get to a game where we actually disagree because we've been on
I
the same
swear
thing
we
with.
didn't tell each other before this.
No, no, we didn't. But I too am going with the Bears. I mean, the Bucks are favored. It's not by much, but it's still
One
to
and a
me a bit
half,
of
I
a
think.
surprise. I would probably make this a straight pick 'em. And I'm favoring the Bears. Fields to get on track. Maybe find a way to get the playmaker DJ Moore the football. You
That'd be nice.
spend pretty good draft compensation to get him. You might as well use him. He can be a number one receiver for a young quarterback. It's nice to have a guy to rely on like that. So good to get him involved. And I think it's just going to be a better game for Fields and a step back for Baker Mayfield and company. So I'm taking Chicago.
Hey man, the Bucks win this and go 2-0, man. I'm gonna be singing their praises a little bit for next week.
Oh boy.
Chargers Titans, which is an interesting one because we talked the Chargers need this one. I'm picking them in this game, but the Titans, defensively looked pretty good last week, but offensively there's a lot to be desired there. I mean, Tannehill is not going to be long for this Titans starting job. It's just it's inevitable. I wouldn't be surprised. I swear to God, if he has another bad game, if he's not the starter for Week 3, um, that leash is going to be short there. You got to kind of see what you have in Malik Willis, and then you also, of course, have Levis also sitting there. You know, he's not going to have a long leash there, and the Chargers, you cannot go 0-2. You cannot go 0-2. You need to start making progress on this talented team. I'm taking the Chargers.
I am as well. It seems like the Titans, like when they win, it's because Derrick Henry just explodes and has like these
Yep.
crazy big games. While the Saints kind of held them down in Week 1. That combined with Tannehill's 3 interceptions,
Yep.
like that's just not a winning
Right.
formula. And
Do you
even
remember his completion percentage for Week 1?
tell me,
47.1. I had to look it up. I knew it was under 50.
yeah, I figured
47.1. Are
I
we
figured it was
kidding?
under 50.
I
Yeah.
mean, come on.
It's not good. And even with that, like it was what, a 1 point game
Yep.
against the Saints. So that their defense can keep them in games. Obviously, not having Eckler is an issue for the Chargers, but they've got capable backups. I just feel like the Titans have a decent pass rush and run defense, but they can be exploited in the secondary. I think Herbert's going to be able to work his weapons, Keenan Allen and company, Chargers to get the win.
Yeah, there's different levels to it, Brian. The Chiefs are next week. If they're 0-2, I'm not really panicking. The Bills or the Chargers are 0-2. Ooh, we're having some conversations next week, let me tell you. The Cards and the Giants, Brian. This, for me, right here, my lock of the week. I'm picking the Giants in this one. There is no way in the world against Josh Dobbs, who's been in the building less than 3 weeks, that the Giants, who just got embarrassed, are going to go into Arizona and lose this game. The Cardinals are basically holding up a sign, even though they played decently competitively last
Hey,
week. We are tanking. And teams that historically get embarrassed, the next week they kind of turn the page and they look a lot better. I'm taking the Giants. This is my lock of the week. There is no way that this team is going to lose. If they lose, oh my God, the New York Post is going to rip them to shreds. They need to win this game.
Especially because you look at like their overall schedule to start the year and it's like tough game after tough game.
Yep.
Like we mentioned, they've got the 49ers on a short week coming up. So this is the one where it's like you got to have this one against, one of the doormats of the league, which was kind of shockingly competitive
They
in
were.
week one. Had the lead in the second half in Washington. That was like one score that you looked at and was like, whoa, or is Washington going to lose this game? They wound up pulling it out, but obviously Arizona we don't think very much of, and the Giants absolutely have to have a bounce back. I mean, Vegas doesn't really seem to think all that highly of them. Only a 4-point favorite. It's not
Yeah,
like
it's
they're a
awful.
10-point favorite. But I think a lot of that is the reaction to how they played in week one. I have to believe their offense is just going to run a lot more smoothly, get Barkley going, I think is the big key, and just let Daniel Jones have some time to throw the football, get Darren Waller the ball, and the Giants should be home free with a win.
I agree with that one. The second 4:05 game, Bry, is Niners Rams. For me, this is an 8.5 point spread. I kind of get that, and I kind of don't. I think the Rams would get a little bit more respect. Maybe this would be like a 6.5 point spread, but nevertheless, it's the last I checked, it was an 8.5 point spread. I'm still taking the Niners. I mean, I think they this game might be a little bit closer than people think it's going to be, but otherwise, there's too much talent here. The Rams, I've said it. I mean, come on, they're rebuilding, retooling. If Les Snead wants to say that, they're just not ready. They played great last week. Maybe they're going to end up being a better team than I thought they would be. But you're going against maybe one of the classes of the league. Never mind the conference. Um, this could be a long day as a Rams fan here. That being said, I come back here next week, Brian, and the Rams are 2-0. We're gonna have some things to talk about. So, but for now, I'm taking the Niners here to win pretty comfortably.
I think if that's the case, we might see the confetti start to come down from the
I might
ceiling
get
and the
some
floor.
poppers coming in here. You never know.
But I am taking the 49ers. I just have a feeling it's not going to be all that close. I just think the
I can see
49ers
it.
are going to continue to flex their muscle and have another game like they did last week. The Rams to be a little more overwhelmed, more like the team that you thought they would be. Had the surprising result in week one. I think it comes crashing back down to earth in week two.
Yeah. The only thing I ask for is please keep Matt Stafford healthy. That's literally all I ask for. 425 game, Bry, is Jets Cowboys. I'm sure you were super excited about this about a week ago, but not as much now. The demolition that the Cowboys did to the Giants in week one, this defense is they're going to be great. I mean, they might be like historically great. I think you got a couple great defenses this year that are really going to break some records, and I have them beating the Jets pretty comfortably. The spread's decently high in this game. I think it's like 9.5 the last time I saw it. I took the points. I completely thought that was the way to go. I think Zach Wilson's in for a long day coming off less than a week of preparation. And this Cowboys team, don't be surprised they win by 17.
Yeah, I feel like this is a game where the Jets are going to be able to hang around early, and then it's just going to come down to a mistake or two from Wilson in the second half, and the
Yep.
Cowboys' defense turns it into a short field, and their offense able to punch it in. I feel like a lot of people are going to be on the Jets this week, thinking the Cowboys are a little overvalued, coming off the 40-0 win. That they're not as good as that score indicated, and the Jets with all the talent that they have and the pressure basically off now that Rodgers isn't on the field. But I'm with you. I think the Cowboys are going to be too much for the Jets to handle. I think it's close early. Cowboys pull away late.
Yeah, I could see something like that. That could end up being a landslide game as well. A game in the final 425 game that I think is going to be a snooze fest is Commanders going to Denver. I'm taking Denver here. I could see this game going either way. The line is really not that big in here. But Sean Payton error, you can't have the Broncos go 0-2. Wilson didn't really throw the ball down the field last week, was kind of very lackluster. Commanders played decently well, but I think up there in Mile High, they'll find enough. They're supposed to get Judy back for this week. I'm taking the Broncos to win this one.
Yeah, this game to me has 13-9 written all over it.
Absolutely,
That's
absolutely.
my score. I'm
Yeah,
going 13-9, and I'm taking Denver. I thought the offense showed some signs of life, like Wilson wasn't a total disaster. Completion percentage was definitely up.
for sure.
Certainly helps getting Judy back on the field. And yeah, like Sam Howell on the road, I just don't really feel all that comfortable with that, so I'm going Broncos.
The Sunday night game should be a fun one. It's Dolphins Patriots. I think this is going to be a really good one. The Patriots won a game against Tua here, I think a year or two ago, and I'm really excited to see how this high flying offense goes against a very good Patriots defense. That being said, I'm still riding with the Dolphins. I think this team right now is a little bit too much for the Patriots to handle. It could be an exciting one. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that the Patriots win, but for right now, everybody healthy on the Dolphins. I see them playing a really effective game and winning this one.
So that is now 14 games that we have picked, including the Thursday night game. We are in agreement on all
And
14.
the one that you switched was the Colts Texans, right? That was the only one that you disagree with just for the hell of it.
Oh, that's right. So
Yeah,
there was one disagreement. Yeah, it's basically, yeah.
yeah.
So it's a good thing I decided to pick one there. We don't want to be in agreement on every single one. Yeah, I'm going with the Dolphins. I mean, how can you not after that week one performance with that offense just lighting up the scoreboard? Probably not going to have as much success against a stingier defense, coordinated, of course, by Bill Belichick. But yeah, I think the Dolphins have too much firepower for the Patriots to overcome. Not enough on the offensive side for New England to keep up with them. I'm going Miami.
Now we might have some differences here, Brian, because we have the week two thing that they've been doing of two Monday night games. They used to do this in
Yeah.
week one, now they do it in week two here. So and I hate when they do this because they used to do a 7 o'clock and a 10 o'clock game. Now they're doing 7:15, 8:15. So both of these games are running simultaneously at some points. I just hate when they do that. But the first game is 7:15. The Saints go to the Panthers. I think for the most part this game is going to be pretty boring. But I'm actually taking the Panthers in this one. I think I wasn't super impressed with what they did with week one, but I also was not really impressed with Derek Carr and the Saints offense did at all in week one. I think here on the road on Monday night in Carolina, I think this is going to be another close game, 16-14, something like that. But I see the Panthers pulling this one out.
Yeah, I definitely see a close game, but I think I'm going to go the other way here with the Saints and trust Derek Carr, the team that I think is going to win the division. If they're going to do that, they're going to have to play well in the division against the quote unquote lesser teams in that division. And I think in this case, they're going to be able to beat a Carolina team that Bryce Young, I guess there were some positive takeaways from his debut in
Mm-hmm.
the NFL, but I just think the Saints have a better overall team and are going to be able to win this one.
The final game, Bry, for week two is the 8:15 Monday night game of the Browns going into the Steelers. I said earlier, I am not selling my Steelers stock. I am picking the Steelers to win this game. I think, again, teams that get embarrassed historically the next week that they bounce back. And, I don't think there was more impressive plays from the Browns defense than there really was from that offense. I mean, that offense and Watson still look extremely shaky. He does not look nearly like the player that he was about 3 years ago. And I think the Steelers, they will bounce back. Pickett will play better. TJ Watt still had 3 sacks in week one. I think he'll be harassing here Watson in week two. And I see with that whole frenzy going on there in Pittsburgh, begging them for a good performance, I think they're going to pull this one out.
So it seemed that all we had to do was flip the day and we get
That's all we
some
had to do.
disagreements. So and I think you kind of thought that might be the case as we went into the Monday picks. But yeah, I'm gonna go Cleveland here. I think it's gonna be a close game, kind of one of these slug it out divisional games that it always seems to be when the teams in that division meet up. But yeah, I'm riding the Browns. They might not have Amari Cooper, which would be a
Yes,
blow
he's very
on
questionable.
offense. And Nick Chubb, I feel like, doesn't get enough credit for how good of a bell cow running back he is. And I think they're just going to ride the running game. Maybe Deshaun Watson gets more comfortable as the season goes on. He had one game under his belt. I see like kind of a 16-13 game here, pretty low scoring, but I'm going to take Cleveland.
Yeah, we have some. We're predicting some really boring games, but that's probably what's going to happen. But guys, that's our week 2 picks here. A wacky week 1, some somber moments here in week 1, some highs, some lows, but it was a lot of fun here. It's only week 1. Crazy things happen in week 1, so we'll see how our predictions go. But for the most part, Brian and I are in agreements here in week 2, which could be for better or worse. We'll see how that goes. Could be a bad sign. We'll see. Let us know your picks down below. We'd love to hear your thoughts for any team that you have, any crazy stories you want to talk about, the Rodgers story, you want to talk about any of the other stuff that happens. We would love to hear that in the comments below. Of course, we're trying to stay more regular this season, so we already did it here through weeks for before week 1 and now after week 1 here and into week 2. Anyone that's watched this far, we greatly appreciate you, whether you're listening in your car or you're actually watching us here online. It is much, much appreciated. And of course, like the video, subscribe to the channel, share with your friends if you'd be so kind. And until next week on First and 10, thanks for watching.